Hi everyone, and welcome to the August edition of the monthly podcast from the Humanitarian Team here at Caritas Australia, bringing humanitarian news and highlights from here and around the world. I'm Jill.
And I'm Sally.
And sadly, it's just the two of us this month as we've said farewell to Jasper as he heads off travelling, but we look forward to introducing you to a new team member next month. We are recording on Wednesday, the 5th of August, so we're working on information up until today. Of course, things are always changing in the humanitarian world, so for anything breaking, do make sure to check the news. As always, there's always a lot happening. So Sally, did you want to run us through what the big events are that you're keeping your eye on at the moment?
Yeah, thanks, Jill. So the first one that comes to mind is the Refugee Convention turns 75. And I'll also touch on that World Humanitarian Day will be happening in 2 weeks, which is the 19th of August. But regarding the Refugee Convention, so it was first signed on the 28th of July 1951, and it was developed as a response in the aftermath of both of the world wars, when millions of people were forced to flee their homelands in search of refuge. The 1951 Refugee Convention and its 1967 Protocol, they are still the key legal documents that protect the rights of refugees at the international level. There have been some changes and many discussions throughout those 75 years, but I think the core principle of the convention, and it is non-refoulement, a rule that asserts that a refugee should not be returned to a country where they face serious threats to their life or freedom. In many of the groups that I converse in and forums that we'll often talk about concepts like this, and do we think that they're still relevant today? This one, along with many other rules and laws at that very international level, there is agreement that now more than ever, yes, they are still very relevant, and they are the baseline and the values of these. We still need to continue to hold on to them and ensure that we are following them. In our line of work, I also just want to say that we do provide a lot of assistance to other types of displaced populations, and one of the main ones are, we call them IDPs, or internally displaced populations. They have a different legal status to refugees, because a refugee is someone who has technically crossed a border and is therefore seeking refuge outside of their homeland or that state, whereas an internally displaced person is someone who has maybe fled their home but has remained within their homeland. But I think for the individuals themselves, they are moving away from danger and trying to find a safe space for themselves and their families. Unfortunately, today there are 41.6 million documented refugees worldwide. This is the largest ever in history. On top of that, there are 9 million pending asylum seekers. There are 68.7 million internally displaced people, and this is bringing a total of almost 1.8 million people that are said to be total number of people that are forcibly displaced globally. God. So it's a lot of people, and I think, where does Caritas fit into this? And so as a confederation, because we're, Caritas offices all around the world, and a lot of the work that we do is providing assistance, dignity and support to many of these displaced populations, because as you can imagine, if you've been forced from your home or if you have fled from your home, you often don't have much with you. I think many of the people that I have met throughout my working life that have been forced from their homes, the one thing that they all want is they want to ultimately be able to return home. But as we know, for many reasons, they can't. And so they need to be given support and resources so that they can just get through each day with a bit of dignity. The other, I just want to, as well, another big topic that I wanted to raise with everybody is to, I guess, internally and externally, is a big thank you to everyone. After the Venezuela earthquakes that hit on the 24th of June, the generous public, we've raised almost $700,000 towards the appeal, and this money will go towards the people and communities of Venezuela. We have been actively communicating with Caritas Venezuela, and they have actively been providing a lot of support since the earthquake hit. They have been putting systems and processes in place where there's a 24-hour cycle of activities that are ongoing. And this is in conjunction with trained staff, new staff, and thousands of volunteers throughout the country. Caritas Venezuela next week will be sharing a program proposal and the design with us, and we believe that it's going to be a $10 million US program, and it potentially will be for about 1 or 2 years, and it will very much be looking at this recovery of people, so helping them to rebuild their livelihoods, provide them with safe shelter and the psychological support, because there can often be a lot of trauma after such an event.
Yeah, of course. And thanks, Sally. It is really incredible to hear $700,000 from across the Australian public in such a short time frame is a remarkable contribution. And it's also been really incredible just to see how Caritas Venezuela have managed to pull together with the support from other member organisations, because delivering that emergency response immediately following event while trying to think through and plan a systemic response over the next 2 years using $10 million, that's no small feat. So they've really done an incredible job.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's really, really helpful and good that as a confederation like Caritas, members throughout the world have been able to, there have been some direct extra staff have travelled into the country. There's been different networks that have been set up to see what type of support can be provided to Caritas Venezuela, because as you're saying, it's a lot of work. It can be very tiring, but there's been a huge amount of support globally, which is fantastic to see. And talking about earthquakes, so Jill, you're going to do a little bit of a deep dive for us around Myanmar.
Yeah, so asking people to cast their minds back a little bit, only 12 months. So in March of last year, Myanmar experienced a series of earthquakes that were catastrophic on top of what was already a very difficult humanitarian situation in Myanmar. So many people will be familiar that Myanmar has a long, complicated history of conflict, displacement, political instability, often access issues for humanitarian actors as well, and it has been a complicated environment with a lot of need for a long time. And against that backdrop, in March there were 2 earthquakes, and they affected about 1.35 million people. So a huge number of people who were displaced, who had damaged homes or damaged infrastructure, which meant that potentially, even if their homes wasn't damaged, their situation was still unlivable. So an example would be someone who might have lost access to toilet facilities or water as a result of that earthquake, even if they still had a roof under which to sleep. So 12 months ago, Myanmar activated an emergency response. Caritas Myanmar activated an emergency response immediately following that event, and they were able to provide food, shelter, protection and other life-saving support to communities really, really quickly in that environment, because again, they are so embedded, they were already present, and they were already working with a lot of those communities who were so severely impacted. Back in Australia, Caritas donors, of course, were extremely generous. So following that earthquake event, we were able to raise over $500,000 from the Australian public to support the efforts of Caritas Myanmar in responding to earthquake-impacted communities, as well as those communities who were experiencing both conflict and the impacts of the earthquake simultaneously. So today what I want to do is kind of look at, well, 12 months on, what has that support been able to contribute towards, and what are some of the program outcomes that we've been able to see. So over the last 12 months, Caritas has been working across a lot of local authorities, other humanitarian actors, through local church networks, and they've provided life-saving and recovering support to more than 399,000 people, which is a huge number in and of itself, but those people are spread across 631 communities. So logistically, that is an absolutely, as someone who's been involved in recovery efforts, that is mind-blowing to be trying to manage program operations across 630 communities. It's absolutely huge.
And I remember, and I was often working quite closely with some of the coordinators on the ground, and even the fact of, because of the still the active conflict was happening during this time, so security, just like gaining access to communities as well kept getting displaced due to the conflict. Access kept changing on a daily basis, so it was a really huge effort from a lot of the staff in country they were quite quickly able to get quite a lot of assistance to people in need.
Yeah, and you're right, it is an extremely dynamic environment where assistance often isn't a one and done situation where you visit a community once and that's the end of the story. You're constantly working with them over those 12 months as they experience renewed displacement or renewed needs emerging from the conflict. The other thing that's really remarkable about the assistance Caritas is providing in response to that earthquake is that it's all comprehensive multisectoral assistance. So there's a really wide range of supports that are available to people, and our local partners are looking at what kind of support does a household or a specific community need holistically, rather than limiting it to one type of intervention. So for example, rather than focusing solely on WASH support, they're going into communities, developing a needs assessment that makes sense for that community, and then targeting their support accordingly, which means they're doing a lot of different stuff. So there's food support, there's multi-purpose cash assistance, there's housing repairs, there's renovations, there's building and re-establishing clean water supplies that have been destroyed, providing hygiene kits, doing hygiene promotion in some cases, as well as helping people to re-establish their livelihoods, and also helping people to, I guess, organise and negotiate as a community. So building that community development sector as they work with communities so that people are able to advocate for their needs more broadly.
Yeah, and it can often be quite humbling when you hear the stories and you see what happens that in times of great need, and it's really amazing the support and really how uplifting some of this work can really be. And yes, it's horrible for the trauma and the displacement people go through, but it's amazing to see how they can sometimes come out a little bit stronger as well, and with different connections and different community support.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. And I guess one of the human interest stories, or one of the case studies that came out of that earthquake response, really speaks to that idea of building back better, both physically in terms of infrastructure, but also in terms of socially, where you leave a community after an event like this. So one of the stories that was shared from our partners in Myanmar was of a 32-year-old woman who was living with her husband and her 6-year-old daughter at the time of the earthquake. She had spent years building up a really small tailor business, so working very hard to put away savings, to slowly buy equipment and to establish a business that was essentially just covering basic needs for the family. It had taken her about 3.5 years to get to that point, which of course is right when the earthquake strikes. So following the earthquake, she lost a lot of the equipment in her business. Some of the structure from which she was operating from was also damaged. And essentially she found herself with new expenses. She'd lost stored food, she'd lost some of the animals that the family relied on, as well as their business infrastructure, as well as their income source. So what she was able to do through the support from Caritas Myanmar is that she received about Australian $400 in a livelihood grant. She was able to spend that flexibly, so she could decide on what she needed most for her business to get back up and running. She elected to buy new materials and new equipment, and she was able to buy materials that improved her business outcomes. So she bought a new steam iron, and I'm no sewer, but from what I understand, that allowed her to produce more clothes at a cheaper rate, which meant that she could expand her business operations, she could take on more customers each day, and her daily income actually grew. So before the earthquake event, she was earning about $14 a day through her business. After the support from Caritas Myanmar, she was able to grow her income to $20 a week, which allowed her to help cover healthcare and school expenses for her daughter after the event as well.
Nice.
And so for me, this story, I guess it's great in a lot of ways. I think when people think of an emergency response, it's easy to think of, shelter, food, blankets, those really critical, urgent support needs that people have. But for me, this story is a really great example of how providing a livelihood grant to that person meant that they were then able to meet their food, shelter, and other kind of urgent needs on an ongoing basis by re-establishing their income source. In this particular case, it was a much more sustainable intervention for partners to be providing. And I guess that's what's so great about Caritas globally, is that being embedded in communities means that you can make those really bespoke, localised programming decisions, and you're able to get to people quickly where they're facing that kind of fork in the road after a disaster event of if they receive the right assistance at the right time, potentially they're able to re-establish themselves really quickly, be independent, not have that ongoing reliance on further support, and potentially even be in a better situation than they were before the disaster event and more resilient to the next one. Without that support, they're potentially set back by years, if not generations. So yeah, a really beautiful story.
It is a nice story, and I think as well, often think about as well there are so many in-country coordination mechanisms that are also happening. So what we often see is that, maybe this individual, she was able to potentially receive immediate food support they can often be like a food basket for 3 months, and then receiving this livelihood, and then she was then able to be self-sufficient afterwards. So it does sometimes need to be a coordinated effort amongst different agencies and organisations, which does often happen as well. But it can be really difficult for us to capture a lot of everything that's truly happening for individuals and across communities. Well, that's it for our August monthly podcast. Thanks, Jill. It's always nice to hear a case study. So thank you to everybody listening today, and we will see you next month.